Your mountain is the block between you and the life you want to live. Facing it is also the only path to your freedom and becoming. You are here because a trigger showed you to your wound, and your wound will show you to your path, and your path will show you to your destiny. Hmm. When you arrive at this breaking point, the foot of the mountain, the heat of the fire, the night that finally wakes you, you are the crux of the breakdown. And if you are willing to do the work, you'll find that it is the entryway to the breakthrough you have spent your entire life waiting for. Your old self can no longer sustain the life you are trying to lead. It is time to it is time for reinvention and rebirth. You must release your old self into the fire of your vision and be willing to think in a way that you have never even tried before. You must mourn the loss of your younger self. True, the person who's gotten you this far, but who is no longer equipped to carry you onward. Hmm, question. Mark, you must envision and become one with your future self, the hero of your life that is going to lead you from here. The task in front of you is silent, simple, and monumental. We don't know. It is a feat most do not even get to the point of attempting. Really. You must now learn agility, resilience, and self understanding. You must change completely, never to be the same again. I suppose, in a sense. The mountain that stands in front of you is the calling of your life. I doubt your purpose for being here and your path finally made clear. We'll see about that. One day, this mountain will be behind you, but who you become in the process of getting over it will stay with you always. That I can agree with. In the end, it's not the mountain that you must master, but yourself. Alright, chapter 1. The mountain is you. There is nothing holding you back in life more than yourself. If there is an ongoing gap between where you are and where you want to be, and your efforts to close it are consistently met with your own resistance, pain, and discomfort, self sabotage is almost always at work. On the surface, self sabotage seems masochistic. It appears to be a product of self hatred, low confidence, or a lack of willpower. In reality, self sabotage is simply the presence of an unconscious need that is being fulfilled by self sabotaging behavior. To overcome this, we must go through a process of deep psychological excavation. We must pinpoint the traumatic event, release unprocessed emotions, find healthier ways to meet our needs, reinvent our self image, and develop principles such as emotional intelligence and resilience. It is no small task, and yet it is the work that all of us must do at one point or another. Self sabotage is not always obvious at the onset. When Carl Jung or Jung was a child, he fell on the floor on the ground in school and hit his head. When he got hurt, he thought to himself, yes, maybe I won't have to go to school now. Though he is known today for his insightful body of work, he actually didn't like school or fit in well with his peers. Shortly after his accident, Jung began experiencing sporadic and uncontrollable fainting spells. He unconsciously developed what he would call a neurosis and ultimately came to realize that all neuroses are substitutes for legitimate suffering. In Jung's case, Carl Jung, I'll look it up later, he made an unconscious association between fainting and getting out of school. He came to believe that fainting spells were a manifestation of his unconscious desires to get out of class, where he felt uncomfortable and unhappy. Likewise, for many people, their fears and attachments are very often just symptoms of deeper issues for which they do not have any better way to cope. Self sabotage is a coping mechanism. Self sabotage is what happens when we refuse to consciously meet our innermost needs, often because we do not believe we are capable of handling them. Mhm. Sometimes we sabotage our relationships because what we really want is to find ourselves, though we are afraid to be alone. Sometimes we sabotage our professional success because what we really want is to create art, even if it will make us seem less ambitious by society's measures. Sometimes we sabotage our healing journey by psychoanalyzing our feelings, because doing so ensures we avoid actually experiencing them. Sometimes we sabotage our self talk because if we believed in ourselves, we'd feel free to get back out in the world and take risks, and that would leave us vulnerable. In the end, self sabotage is very often just a maladaptive coping mechanism, a way we give ourselves what we need without having to actually address what that need is. But like any coping mechanism, it is just that, a way to cope. It's not an answer, it's not a solution, and it does not ever truly solve the problem. We are merely numbing our desires and giving ourselves a little taste of temporary relief. Sometimes our most sabotaging behaviors are really the results of long held and unexamined fears we have about the world and ourselves. Perhaps it is the idea that you are unintelligent, unattractive, or disliked. Perhaps it is the idea of losing a job, taking an elevator, or committing to a relationship. In other cases, it can be more abstract, such as concept of someone coming to get you, violating your boundaries, getting caught, or being wrongly accused. These beliefs become attachments over time. For most people, the abstract fear is really a representation of a legitimate fear because it would be too scary to actually dwell on the real fear. You will project those feelings onto issues of circumstances that are less likely to occur. If the situation has an extremely low likelihood of becoming reality, it therefore becomes a safe thing to worry about. Okay, I get that. Because subconsciously, we already know it isn't going to happen. Therefore, we have an avenue to express our feelings without actually endangering ourselves. For example, if you're someone who is deeply afraid of being a passenger in a car, maybe your real fear, is the loss of control over the idea that someone or something else is controlling your life. Oh, perhaps the fear is of moving forward, and the moving car is simply a representation of that. If you were aware of the real issues, you could begin working to resolve it, perhaps by identifying the ways you are giving up your power or being too passive. However, if you aren't aware of the real problem, you'll continue to spend your time trying to convince yourself to not be triggered and anxious while riding in the car and find that it only gets worse. If you try to fix the problem on the surface, you'll always come up against the wall. This is because you're trying to rip off a band aid before you have the strategy to heal the wound. Mm. Self sabotage is also one of the first signs that your inner narrative is outdated, limiting, or simply incorrect. Your life is defined not only by what you think about it, but also about what you think of yourself. Your self concept is an idea that you have spent your whole life building. It was created by piecing together inputs and influences from those around you, what your parents believed, what your peers thought, what became self evident through personal experience, and so on. Your self image is difficult to adjust because your brain's confirmation bias works to affirm your pre existing beliefs about yourself. When we self sabotage, it is often because we have a negative association between achieving the goal we aspire to and being the kind of person who has or does that thing. If your issue is that you want to be financially stable, and yet you keep ruining every effort you made to get there, you have to go back to your first concept of money. How did you Where's concept of money? How did your parents manage their finances? More importantly, what did they tell you about people who had it and people who didn't? Many people who struggle financially will justify their place in life by disavowing money as a whole. They'll say that all rich people are terrible. If you grew up with people who told you your entire life that people who have money are this way, guess what you're going to resist having? Your anxiety around the issue that you're self sabotaging is usually a reflection of your limiting belief. Maybe you associate being healthy with being vulnerable because you have had a parent who was perfectly healthy when they suddenly fell ill. Maybe you aren't writing your magnum opus because you don't really want to write, you just want to be seen as successful. Again, because that will get you praise, which is typically what people revert to when they want acceptance but haven't gotten it. Maybe you keep eating your wrong foods because they soothe you, but you haven't stopped to ask what they have to keep soothing you from. But you haven't stopped to ask what they have to keep soothing you from. Okay? Maybe you aren't really a pessimist, but you don't know how to connect with the people in your life other than by complaining to them. In order to reconcile this, you have to begin to challenge these pre existing ideas and then adopt new ones. You have to be able to recognize that not everybody with money is corrupt. Not by a long shot, even more. Not by a long shot. Even more importantly, given that there are people who use their money in selfish ways, it is even more important that good people with great intentions are fearless in pursuit of acquiring this essential tool to create more time, opportunity, and wellness for themselves and others. We have to recognize that being healthy makes you less vulnerable, not more. And that criticism comes with creating anything for the public and isn't a reason to not do it. You have to show yourself that there are many different ways to self-soothe that are more effective than unhealthy food choices, and that there are far better ways to connect with others than through negativity. Once you begin to really question and observe these pre-existing beliefs, you begin to see how warped and illogical they were all along, not to mention distinctly holding you back from your ultimate potential. Human beings experience a natural resistance to the unknown because it is essentially the ultimate loss of control. This is even true. This is true even if what's unknown is benevolent or even beneficial to us. Self sabotage is very often the simple product of unfamiliarity, and it is because anything that is foreign, no matter how good, will always be uncomfortable until it is also familiar. This often leads people to confuse the discomfort of the unknown with being wrong or bad or ominous. However, it is simply a matter of psychological adjustment. What's this? Gay Hendricks calls this your upper limit or your tolerance for happiness. Everyone has a capacity for which they allow themselves to feel good. This is similar to what other psychologists refer to as a person's baseline, or their set predisposition that they eventually revert back to, even if certain events or circumstances shift temporarily. Small shifts compounded over time can result in permanent baseline adjustments. However, they often don't stick because we come up on our upper limits. The reason we don't allow those shifts to become baselines is because as soon as our circumstances extend beyond the amount of happiness we're accustomed to, we find ways to uh, both conscious and unconscious, to bring ourselves back to a feeling we're comfortable with. We are programmed to seek what we've known. Even though we think we're after happiness, we're actually trying to find whatever we're most used to. I guess that's all for now. The next one would be self sabotage becomes. Self sabotage comes from belief systems. Ooh, interesting. That's for another day.